What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, powered by Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Welcome to the new age of college football. We have drama over Simeon Barrow, defensive tackle from Michigan State. He's in Miami. He's matriculated, working out, and now there's drama. There's murkiness. Is he headed to Missouri? We will give you the absolute latest from sources directly involved in the situation. Also, huge visit weekend for the Miami Hurricanes. We will break down all 16 official visitors and where Miami stands and what that could develop into with each of these recruits. Also, Miami received a decommitment from wide receiver Wade Charles. We will give you the inside information on what went down with that one. First, want to talk about some folks that you don't need to worry about. The situation is not murky, and that is Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life. All right, Pete, get in here. It's a new age of college football. You just left the Asian world, so you saw some of this murkiness firsthand, and you could probably see what's coming. Simeon Barrow, defensive tackle, committed to Miami. We did the reaction pod. He was on campus working out, matriculated, meaning he was in classes, going to classes. And as I understand, it's been reported by 247, On3 is reported, and I've confirmed with sources directly involved in the situation. There's some murkiness that he could be potentially going to or wanting to go to Missouri. Now, the absolute latest here is the situation is ongoing. There's communication on both sides. We've seen situations like this where the player ultimately leaves. We've seen situations like this where the player ultimately stays. Think back to Daryl Jackson coming down to Miami for a weekend after transferring to FSU and then ultimately staying with FSU. So we'll see where this develops into. The fact that he has matriculated onto campus makes it a little murkier as far as what he can and cannot do in his eligibility. Those things are all being sorted out. This is a new era, new processes. Things are happening fast, but at the same time, there's not a lot of clarity. There's no playbook. So I spoke to someone directly involved in this process. And as of an hour ago, and this is 1:35 p.m. on Friday, nothing is for certain in this situation. We'll have to just wait and see. We'll give you the absolute latest as it unfolds, but certainly there is smoke to the fire. Simeon Barrow is considering going to Missouri after having matriculated to Miami. Miami would obviously like to keep the player, so we'll see where this situation goes. Miami really needs defensive tackle help. That's why Barrow is such a big get for Miami with Jared Harrison Hunt going to SMU. If he goes, you're relying on Ahmad Moten, Josh Horton, some of your homegrown guys to really step up. Justin Scott, the 5-star true freshman who just arrived on campus, he might get his development accelerated if Simeon Barrow doesn't stick around, but it's an ongoing process, and we'll give you the absolute latest here and also on CanesInsight.com, the forums. That'll be the actual fastest way to keep track of it. Keep refreshing. That thread is hot and being updated by the minute with anything that happens. Not the only situation here for the Canes, although the second one I'm about to describe is a little more expected, which is the decommitment of Wade Charles, wide receiver out of Palm Beach. He's somebody that Miami had evaluated. They went to see him in spring. Ultimately, the sides parted ways mutually. I don't think this is a situation that really hurts Miami. Miami's going to have a lot of options in terms of receivers from Florida, receivers elsewhere that are very talented. They think they'll be able to upgrade at that position. Pete, I kind of let you hang in there. I know you saw Wade Charles at the Under Armour camp and talked with him. This really was something we kind of expected even back then, right? 2 months ago.
Yeah. And look, not to pile on the kid or the prospect, but I think this is something that Miami staff has kind of been working towards with the intention of, and if you kind of look at some of the stuff that we've done on the recruiting class, he hasn't been a guy that we've highlighted or featured all that much. But look, he has the frame, he has the size, and hopefully for him, he finds a good landing spot. I'm sure he'll have some suitors. But again, I don't think this is a guy that was ultimately in Miami's plans here.
Yeah, this is a 4-star player. Really, his frame is what stands out to him. He looks the part of a college receiver, a developed college receiver already. So he'll have Power 4 offers. He'll be fine. And Miami, I think, will recover. And we'll talk about some of their targets that are here this weekend. And, I jumped off the Barrow thing before cutting to you. Any thoughts on this situation? Again, having been involved in some of these NIL discussions and some of the weird things that come up And some of the stuff doesn't even get reported, right? That gets settled before it even gets out like this. What's your take on Barrow?
Well, the fact that he was on campus and enrolled is the interesting thing to me, D, because again, look, if he ends up leaving Miami, there's not really much to sugarcoat it. It would be a loss. It's a guy that you expected to step in and be having a starting type role here. But it's interesting because if there is any uneasiness with your decision and things of that nature, right? The murkiness would probably come after you committed and didn't enroll on campus. And we've seen guys who sign paperwork, get to campus, but don't go through the process of like moving in and starting workouts and all that, right? So again, it's today's age of college football without a doubt, but that's the part to me. And I know there was a deadline there for him to have to enroll by. So, that's the other part of it that's in the equation there. But it'll be interesting to see how the rest of this thing plays out here. Obviously, you talk to people who have been involved in the situation. Are they going to try to make another ditch to go get him, or are they kind of fed up with the situation? That's now something that I guess Coach Cristobal and staff have to really figure out here.
And look, this is a player that Miami counted on. Miami could have gotten another defensive tackle to fill that need. They got Barrow with the expectation that he was going to be the guy or one of the guys. So some of it is the opportunity cost. You lost a chance to get all these other guys because you were relying on Barrow's word that he was going to come to Miami. Hopefully cooler heads prevail and it gets sorted out. But that's a situation certainly to monitor. But look, the news is not all glum. This is a huge, huge recruiting visit for the Canes. They'll be decked out in Miami gear, which, by the way, if you see my shirt, probably my favorite shirt right now. I wear it way too much. Caneswear.com. Pick this one up in person at the store in Davie. The absolute best in Hurricanes gear, baseball, basketball, football, you name it. And by the way, Florida Panthers taking that 3-2 lead yesterday on the verge of the Stanley Cup Finals. No one's got more Panther gear than Caneswear. Miami fan wear, if you want the bigger name, because they cover all Miami sports in Davie and on Caneswear.com. The absolute best. So, Pete, let's dig in here to each of these 16 commits that is visiting this weekend.
Not all commits.
16.
Not all
I'm
commits.
getting ahead of myself. Right? 16 players, including some commits. That's why
hopefully they'll all be committed at one point.
That's why I have you here, Pete, to rein me in. So let's start with a couple players that are not committed, and that's the running back position. Miami has a commit from running back Gerard Pringle out of Armwood. They saw him in spring. They thought he looked fantastic. He's not visiting this weekend, but they saw him in spring and love what they see. They feel very, very good about that player. 10-8 speed guy. The speed translates to the football field. That's their big play guy. So a guy like that you want to complement perhaps with a bigger body. I'm told Miami's not necessarily like desperate for a second back. You have Jordan Lyle, who we highlighted this week, who looks the part. Chris Wheatley-Humphrey's on campus. Mark Fletcher will be back at some point. And he's definitely still in the future plans. Of course, you have Damian Martinez as your starter. AJ Allen's still here. So you got a lot of backs. Elijah Lofton as well can play tailback. So you don't necessarily need a second back, but these are premium guys that Miami really likes that bring some size. So I'll start with Byron Lewis, 5'11", 200 pounds from American Heritage. We all know that school. When you see the NFL list of players from a certain city, Plantation, Florida is always one of the top producers of NFL talent. That's because of American Heritage. This player is 4-star, 212th on the 247 composite. Last year, 160 carries, 1,224 yards, 18 touchdowns. Florida State, Wisconsin, Ohio State, all lined up for visits from him. Teams that like big backs, teams that like to run the ball. So, to me, this is a player Miami likes. Miami has gotten 4-star players from Broward at that position recently: Mark Fletcher, Jordan Lyle, Chris Johnson. So is he going to be the next one? I think it's an important visit to get to know the kid even more. He's been on campus before, but they'll, really deepen that relationship and see how everything goes. I wouldn't pencil Byron Lewis into the class. I think, Florida State might have an edge there. But he's someone that this weekend could go a long way on both sides. Pete, what do you see when you see Byron Lewis run?
Well, I mean, look, if you're bringing him in as potentially the power back, the bigger downhill running back in the class, and he is already at 200 pounds, right? Already looks the part there. We saw with Mark Fletcher how he was able to come in immediately and make an impact. And again, as a young back, you're expecting him to be a bruiser, and he has the frame to be able to come in early at the college level, I believe, and make an impact.
So let's switch gears to another big back who could potentially complement Gerard Pringle, and that is Shakai Mills-Knight. This is an interesting backstory on this kid. Pete and Brad Tejeda did an interview for him on the CanesInSight channel. You can look that up on the YouTube, or you could read the article on CanesInsight.com. Interesting background on the kid, 6'1", 217, so a big back. Already looked great in person when he visited the spring unofficially. He goes to the Baylor School in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He's originally from Quebec, Canada. His uncle is Usain Bolt's, or was Usain Bolt's trainer in track, so Jamaican descent, like a lot of folks in that region. 3-star, 88 on 247, but I think that rating might be a little low when you look at the OVs and you see Michigan, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Ole Miss. That gets you an idea of the sandbox you're playing in with Shakai Mills-Knight. So Pete, I know you interviewed the kid and got a feel for his personality a little bit. What do you remember from that interview?
Yeah, really seemed like a good kid at the Baylor School, one of those very structured type environments where academics are very important, but there's a real structure around the team and film study and work outside of practice, right? So I think would fit very well in terms of what Mario is trying to bring to the roster. And then you said it, I think probably underrated in terms of how the services have him right now, because legit size with breakaway game-changing type speed. So, I mean, as you see here, breaking tackles, but also can bust a big one. So, and a long strider as well, which I'm always a fan of at the running back position.
Yeah, but like I said, it'd be interesting to see that second back position and how it unfolds. There's other backs Miami's in the mix with, Usman Carrara, Jasper Parker, but Miami likes what they have. And Jordan Lyle made a big impression when he showed up on campus. So keep an eye on that position. Again, Gerard Pringle committed and looking very good. All right, moving on to some kids that are committed currently, starting with Luka Gilbert, the tight end out of Lakota West, Cincinnati area, big boy football. We had Zach Carpenter on the podcast, Miami center from that area, and he talked about the competition level that you're going against NFL players, hard-nosed, Power 4, Power 5 players on a weekly basis. Lakota West is one of those schools. 6'7", 233 listed, but from someone who saw him this spring, I heard he's closer to that 250 range, and he's carrying it well. No plans to move him to to tackle. No plans to move him to defensive end. He's going to be a tight end. Worked out really well when Miami was able to observe him. Fluid in his routes, catching the ball. Not something you see a ton on his high school tape. Again, this is a big-time program, and they're asking him to block a lot, but he did show it in a workout setting and in flashes. 4-star player, 253rd player in the country on the composite, basketball background, a center, which you see some of that fluidity, and he's committed to Miami. He's not visiting anywhere else. At least there's nothing scheduled. Pete, you interviewed Luka early on in the process before he was committed to Miami. What was your big takeaway from that interview?
Yeah, I think he told me at the time he was just past 240 pounds, which it would make sense. It's been a couple months, so he probably is at 250 or so there. And the interesting thing with me as you watch these highlights is as today's age of college football and football in general, you get a lot of these bigger wide receivers who aren't true tight ends, right? And they have to learn a lot of the physicality, the toughness. His coaches have put him in a position here at Lakota West, and he gave them credit when I interviewed him that you see how they're using him in line, they're spreading him out wide, but really using his ability as a blocker a lot, and he's very willing to do that. And this is when he was still a little bit on the skinnier side, right? So you got to give his coaches credit, again, as you see here, doing a bunch of different stuff with him out of the backfield, getting out into the flats there. But a lot of times, man, these young tight ends are really oversized receivers, and there's a lot of things in that position they need to learn. You pair that with the fact that Miami coaches were impressed with his fluidity, his route running. To me, you've got another underrated type kid right here.
And look, if you look at the teams that have won national championships in the post-Miami era, let's call it, meaning after 2001, Alabama, obviously, Georgia, multiple times, Ohio State, and recently Michigan, they all have tight ends that can block. They may have tight ends that major in receiving as well, but they will have guys like this for situations where they need that body type, where they need the versatility of a guy that can block and catch. You can't, it's not a tell necessarily when he's in, but he is capable of blocking. Again, you saw that with Michigan. You saw that with Ohio State and some of the guys they've had, and certainly Alabama and Georgia. Remember, Georgia had Brock Bowers and they had Darnell Washington. This guy would be more the Darnell Washington side of things with his size, blocking, and the occasional receiving. And then the guy we're about to talk about, the other commit, he'll fit into the Brock Bowers category, which is another Brock. Brock Schott from Leo, Indiana, 6'3", 215, 4-star on the composite, 221st ranked player in the nation. And me personally, this is my favorite player in the class. Last year, my favorite player was Elijah Lofton. I talked about it, constantly. This is my guy. Just love the way he plays, the tenacity, the instincts, the versatility, the production. This guy is very similar to Lofton, not identical, but similar. And the same reasons you fall in love with this guy. Plays basketball, so he has multi-sport background. He's from, Leo, Indiana, small town. They play hoops out there. But look at the production. 35 catches, 743 yards, 6 touchdowns on offense. Defensively, 67 tackles, 32 for a loss, and 19 sacks. So he's getting it done on both sides of the ball. He's doing it on the basketball court. You see the speed. I mean, this guy's fast. And he's not just quick. He is also fast. Big plays. Is he it's like Brock Bowers, maybe shorter, or Lofton for that matter, shorter for a tight end, but he can run the ball. He can catch and run. He can lead block. He can run routes and get open deep. There's a lot you can do with a player like Brock Schott, and I love the edge that he plays with that you see when he's on defense as well.
Yeah, and he, again, physically looks college ready, right? I mean, you see the picture of him here. I mean, he's got real muscle definition already, and I mean, you're starting to see what they're doing, stacking some playmakers now at the tight end position. Obviously, different player than Luka Gilbert that we just talked about. But, I mean, you imagine pairing this guy with, an Elijah Lofton, right? To me, that's mismatch issues all over the place. And, yes, he's still in high school, but a year from now, a couple years from now, I think you're going to be able to see both of those guys on the field together, as a real issue for opposing defenses.
Let's switch back to the uncommitted players now at wide receiver. We talked about Wade and Charles decommitting. Could he get replaced pretty quick with a guy like Tyler Williams? He has just transferred to Sefner Armwood, which is the same school as Miami's running back commit Gerard Pringle. Before that, he was in Riverview Sumner. 4-star player, 346 on the composite. I love a lot of things about this guy's profile. Plays basketball, number one. Runs track, doesn't have great times. He's probably in that 11.5 range in the 100, but he's a big receiver, almost 200 pounds in high school. So he has size 6'1", I want to say 189 last I checked. So he's not running 4.4, but he's a 4.5 guy. And then you look at some of the production, which receiver is a production position. This guy on a winning team that was 11-2, 585 yards, 14 touchdowns, plus 5 scores in the return game, 3 punt return, 2 TDs. So he has speed. That's football speed, functional athleticism, also play defense, got a pick. The list of schools is interesting because you have UCF and Syracuse there, but you also have Georgia as far as OVs. I believe Alabama's offered as well. Florida's offered as well. So there's a kid with all kinds of interests. Miami really likes the player. He's been on campus unofficially. I heard he's a great kid as well, which to me is very important at the receiver position. You need to trust the guy to at least be a worker, at least be able to work on his craft when you're not watching. That to me is important at wide receiver and is a common trait about guys that have succeeded here at the University of Miami. Pete, what do you see when you watch Tyler Williams?
Yeah, the length, right, and very fluid for his size as well. He's a guy who has the frame. You said 189. I've seen him listed at 195 here, but to me, the frame can add some weight pretty easily. He doesn't need to be a 4.3 guy, 4.4 guy, as you said, but he's moving very well at that size. And again, you got to start to stack these chips at the wide receiver position here, D. And I think Tyler Williams would be a great addition.
Moving to the offensive line, Cristobal's favorite position. I'm not seeing the big name Mawanoa, Samson Okollola types as far as the recruiting class. What I'm seeing is big swings on upside. Guys that have the body that you want, the athleticism you want, flash some meanness, and you're hoping to develop them. Mirabal was known for loving guys like this when he was at Oregon. He turned them into big time offensive lines. Not all, you have your 5-star sprinkled in there, but a lot of it were 3-star guys that developed with all big time traits. Jaden Wilkerson fits into that category. This is a absolute monster size wise, 6'6", 330, rank low, 85 rating. Not that much different than some of the guys you've seen starting on the great Oregon lines. Doesn't mean they will be like that, but just for context, this guy was a basketball player. That's how he really got his name out there. He had videos, from recruiting sites as a basketball prospect. So he was a real basketball player, mostly played defense, or played a lot of defense as a sophomore, I should say. Competition has not been great. You're talking about Lake Highland Prep in the Orlando area, Lake Nona. Now he's at Orlando Edgewater, which is a big time program in Orlando. So you're going to see him against better competition, better coaching. He practiced for Miami in the spring. They were able to see him in his spring practice, and they loved what they saw. They're pursuing him strongly. Not a day one necessarily guy, but somebody with tremendous upside to develop, just because, the film's kind of hard to see, Pete, as you can see what you put it on here, but it's not hard to see the size and the athleticism. 6'6", 330. What do you see with Wilkerson?
And I mean, look, another guy who has a basketball background. I saw a couple of his basketball clips where he made a couple steals, and the flexibility is very impressive. I think here his pad level needs some work. He kind of just stands straight up, which is, again, a young offensive lineman with that size, that athleticism. They can get away with a lot at that level, obviously. But I mean, you see the natural athletic ability, again, the flexibility, and he's not tiny either. That's something that I think, and we'll talk about with this next guy here, but like, yes, they are developmental types in terms of their potentials untapped, but these guys that they're recruiting right now at O-line are like not far off physically and strength-wise from what you're looking for. It's not like a complete overhaul once they get here to their bodies. We saw Inez Cooper, the picture that Coach Mirwald put out the other day, but like that's there. It's just you got to work it out of them.
Yeah, and so I think it's a little bit of both. So 6'6", 330. So not tiny is an understatement. This guy's huge, but you're not taking a 240-pound guy and putting the weight on. You're not taking a 390-pound guy and taking the weight off. But I do think you will see a massive change in his body as far as just getting stronger, looking better. But it's you're starting off at a better place because you don't have to get those massive fluctuations in actual size. You could just focus on getting stronger, getting more defined, getting more powerful upper body, lower body. So he's a kind of kid that now he's at Edgewater. I could see Edgewater's playing in the state playoffs. They're playing against a team that's got a lot of prospects, a lot of college coaches in the building to watch that game. And then everybody says, wait a minute, who's this left tackle for Edgewater? He's committed to Miami, assuming Miami's able to close the deal before he blows up. I can see this being that kind of kid. I've seen it before where by the time the playoffs run around and this guy's had some experience with some great competition and his body's starting to come together, you're saying, wow, this guy looks better than some of the 4-stars we got committed. And he's already hopefully locked up for the University of Miami. I know they want to do that. Somebody who is locked up already, TK Mukes. Someone's got to tell me how to pronounce this name. I'm going to ask one of the coaches next time. I got to figure this one out. We already did a commitment video for him when he committed, a reaction video on the YouTube. 6'3.5", closer to 6'4" these days, 340, originally from Chicago. He's from Fletcher in the Neptune Beach area. Miami evaled him in spring, loved what they saw. They wanted him big time, got him to commit quickly. A lot of internal comparisons to Inez Cooper. This is a nasty player you see on the film. He gets guys down, then he beats them up when they're down. He has that edge to him, has that size, probably more of a guard. Again, Inez Cooper comps. He's playing tackle now, can play in space a little bit. The body, he has the size, but they want to reshape the body a little bit. And I've heard he could play not immediately like a Mauanoa, but he's not as far away as some others might think based on the staff's evaluation of him in spring. Pete, you're the offensive line guy. You sign guys that have gone pro, have started games, have gotten to second contracts, big second contracts in the case of Titus Howard. What do you see with TK?
Power and finishing plays. I mean, with offensive and defensive linemen, young trench players, finishing plays, playing through the whistle is always a huge thing. I know scouts look very much of that. Are you just getting the job done in front of you, or are you finishing the man in front of you? And you see that here with TK, and I'm not even going to try to say the last name, but the power, it's evident. So I mean, those two things right away. And I said it, his body is like, yes, he can shed some of that baby fat, but the power's there, the size is there, and he's moving very well already at that weight. So,
and power, I think, is something that we don't talk about enough. Power and strength are not synonymous. Power and size are not synonymous. Power is about your explosiveness, your ability to generate force in a very short area to knock people back. Some of that's flexibility. How low can you get? Some of that is hand strength, the ability to pop guys. A lot of lower body strength as well. It may not be up top, but you have strong lower body. You develop the top later. Ruben Bain is your classic example of someone who didn't look like a weight room warrior, but had extreme power, which allowed him to produce as a true freshman in the ACC. It was a power in his hands, in his lower body, in the way he can uncoil out of his stance. Power is the name of the game, and TK has that.
And understanding leverage, really, D. That's really what it comes down to. That was one of our biggest things with our guys that, before the draft, that we would, have them focus on is understanding how to use leverage. And you may not have the size on a guy, but you can get people in positions where you can use leverage. So that's once a guy like that understands how to do it, it's game over.
And we talked about a couple 4-star commits at tight end. We talked about some sleepers in terms of the offensive line. We're going to talk about some big name defensive recruits that are going to command big time attention and are going to have tremendous NIL opportunities from the SEC. So if you want Miami to land guys like this, remember, we're lucky and blessed to have one of the best collectives in the nation with Canes Connection, the official NIL collective of the Miami Hurricanes. Again, Canes Connection. They've proven they can do it. You saw what they did with Cam Ward. You saw what they did in the recruiting. There's no questions about checks bouncing or the stuff you see with Florida and some of these other programs in the country, Louisville. This is a top-notch collective. Do your part. Use promo code CIS. Sign up today at canesconnection.com. Use promo code CIS. You get 20% off. You see Pete with the hat. You want a hat like that. Sign up, canesconnection.com. You get 20% off, and you also get access to a private insider Zoom where you get the absolute latest from me on what's happening, direct from the sources. It's Canes Connection. You can figure out how inside the game this information is going to be. You want to hear the latest on this recruiting weekend after it happens. And then the following weekend, I'll be live Thursday, non-public information, the absolute most exclusive info for Canes Connection members. Sign up today, promo code CIS for 20% off and access to that Zoom next Thursday, and we'll keep it rolling throughout the visits. Again, we're talking about big-time players. Do your part. Be part of the solution. This is how the game is played. And Miami, we want to be on the winning side of these battles, okay? We're not alone. There's a lot of people at the party. Do your part. All right. So we're here on Hayden Lowe, a defensive end out of Los Angeles, California. Went to the same program as Kayvon Thibodeau, who Mario Cristobal famously signed as the top overall player in the country. Ended up as a top 5 player. Ended up as a Pro Bowl type player now in the NFL. So you like that trend. You want to repeat history here. 6'4", 242, 4-star player, 241. Not rated as high as Thibodeau, but I think he's someone where the arrow's up in his ranking and his development. Certainly interest is there. The classic schools for an LA kid are involved. You're talking USC, Oregon, Washington, University of Texas, along with Miami. Lowe's got a great relationship with Jason Taylor. I saw him in spring when he visited. Guy absolutely looked the part. He looked like an NFL alumni. When I first saw him, I was asking, who is this guy? I don't recognize the face. And they told me it was a high school kid. I couldn't believe it. So he's ready to rock. 6'4", 242 at least. And he's going to be ready to play right away, at least from a physical standpoint, if Miami's able to land the player. They're in very good shape, have done good job with him recruiting. He's already visited once. He's back again. A lot of West Coast interest, but Miami's in a strong position here. They need to have a great weekend with him.
Yeah, explosive first step. And, he just eats up so much space with those long strides. So, to me, like you said, he looks the part already. And we've seen with Ruben Bain that this coaching staff has no problem playing guys early at that spot. And if he does end up at Miami, I think he'd be one of the next in line there for sure.
And look, with defensive end, Miami has a great defensive end group this year with Bain, Messidor, Tyler Barron, Elijah Alston. You have Marquise Lightfoot in the pipeline, Cole McConaughey, Malik Bryant doing some nice things at that stand-up rusher position. So I think Miami's doing well there. You'd like to continue the pipeline. The South Florida has typically, at least lately, been a very good pipeline for edge players. I think that's been the strength locally of South Florida is edge players. You look at Ashton Gelati at Louisville, of course, Ruben Bain, Patrick Payton at FSU. Elijah Roberts at SMU is doing some nice things. There is a ton.
I mean, even in the pros, there's got Josh Uche, Nick Benito, right off. I mean, recently.
Oh, and like the Bosa brothers.
We have
Brian Burns, Greg Rousseau. I mean, I think edge position has been, and of course, Dallas Turner, who was the top defensive player at Alabama, ended up going very high in the NFL draft this past year. So edge has been the position for South Florida, but for whatever reason, this year is not as loaded. There is no Ruben Bain locally. So what do? You go out and you get guys like Hayden Lowe on campus, and the guy we're about to talk about right now, which is Zion Grady out of Enterprise, Alabama, part of the Enterprise trio, which we'll be talking about all of those guys on this show. 6'4", 235. Body type wise, even though the numbers are good, doesn't jump out at you like Hayden Lowe, where you look at him on the hoof and say, this guy's an NFL player. But he has a profile that I love for defensive end and for pass rush because he produces. And I think pass rush, you got to get to the quarterback. I don't like projecting guys that don't sack the quarterback to sack the quarterback at the next level. That's a tricky projection and often fails. If you look at him, 87 tackles, 24 tackles for loss as a junior, 22 quarterback hurries, 11 sacks, INT, 30 varsity games. He's had 34 sacks. So he's been doing it since he got up to varsity. He's got a 4-4 shuttle, so the short area is there, played hoops. When you watch him on film, you just see the bend, you see the change of direction, you see the subtle movements that lead someone without the perfect, textbook frame necessarily, although he's big enough. The reason he's getting the sacks is what you see on film, plus that short area quickness, which you see in the shuttle. FSU, Ohio State, Tennessee, Georgia, Auburn, those are his OVs, but Miami's in a very strong position with Zion Grady. They've already received at least one crystal ball for Zion Grady, and I'm talking to people. I think Jason Taylor's really put Miami in a strong position in this particular recruitment.
Yeah, short area quickness was the phrase I was going to use watching his highlights here. Slippery, right? And I don't think he's going out there and running a 4.5 like some of these edge rushers these days do. But to me, the ability to win in a phone booth, he has that. And look, it's hard to project frame sometimes, but is he someone who could put on, a good 30, 40 pounds and slide inside on pass rushing situations as well?
No question. And this is someone who definitely could play inside. We have him listed as an edge now. He may end up being a D tackle. I think he probably will be. That is Javion Campbell, who is a 4-star player, 184th in the country out of Frankfort, Kentucky, Western Hills High School. Talk about basketball. This guy was a pure basketball player, leading all-time scorer for his high school, all-region selection. First year playing high school, and he finished with 14.5 sacks. He's a big kid. I think he projects as a defensive tackle ultimately. You're talking about Georgia involved, Alabama, Ohio State, Kentucky, where he's from. There's a lot of schools in it with this kid. Miami was able to see him in person. His body is going to need some work. It's just, again, he's a basketball player, but certainly the tools are there to be an absolute monster. He's one of my favorite players to watch on tape. I think this guy, he's ranked as a 4-star. He's moving up to that range, but I put him as a 5-star, 6'5", 265. I see a 300-pound guy that ends up being an elite first-round type talent if he works hard. What do you see with him, Pete?
Yeah, he was the guy a few weeks ago when we first mentioned him on the show, D, and I pulled up his huddle. I was just like, he is ragdolling guys. And the athletic ability there, obviously the basketball, but I mean, once he really puts it all into football now, like you said, the ability to play, I mean, to me, looks like a Leonard Williams type with his frame. Out of Daytona, Maryland, I believe was a school he was at, and obviously he's gone on to have a great NFL career. But that was the first guy, body type wise, that kind of stood out to me with him.
Now let's switch to somebody we know is going to play defensive tackle and someone we saw in person. Pete, you pointed this guy out, literally just running through drills, not knowing anything, saying, who's this guy? When we went to the Under Armour camp 2 months ago, that is Floyd Boucard, 6'3", 315, 3-star player, 593rd ranked player in the country, but that is a low ranking. I think he's way better than that, and he's being recruited that way. From Miami Central, played football last year in Mobile, Alabama. He's originally from Canada. Last year, he had 85 tackles, 27 tackles for loss, 11 sacks, so very productive. Played on the edge a little bit, played tight end, played running back. His team went 5-0, won the state title. We saw him at the Under Armour camp. He was the best player there. I was texting people immediately, just seeing him move through drills. didn't have wasn't fat either. He looked pretty put together at 315. USC, Oregon, Alabama, Michigan State, Oklahoma, but he's on campus. He's obviously in Miami right now. You'd love to keep him in state. It's rare you have defensive tackles like this in Dade County. You want to close on them, Pete. This was your guy from the beginning. What's your thoughts on Boucard?
Well, you see him playing a ton of end. I mean, you see that very impressive player right there coming off the end and batting the ball down. But a guy who played hockey growing up in Canada. And, man, to me, the move for him to come down here to South Florida, right, for his final year, I think is going to help him tremendously. There's great football in Alabama, but he was very well respected when we were at that camp by a lot of his Central teammates who were out there. We'll talk about one of them here in a couple of minutes, but that to me was a big thing because, listen, it's not the end all be all, but if you can be a guy down here and he still has a season to play, but physically, no doubt about it. Like you said, I saw him going through drills and just his footwork, his quickness, and that size is legit as well. We stood next to him, both of us did, and that size is legit. So to me, another well put together body with legit athletic ability here.
Yeah, so let's move on to the linebacker position where we're dealing with teammates of players we already talked about, right? So Eric Winters is a teammate of Zion Grady, the edge we talked about from Enterprise, Alabama. 6'2", 200 pounds, 4-star player, 65th in the country. So like Zion Grady, this is a top 100 player in the nation, super highly recruited. I mean, total athlete. You're talking about basketball player. He played defense, kind of a safety all over the place, passed as a quarterback, ran the ball, caught the ball, 12 touchdowns on offense. Just a true athlete. Could play safety. I think Miami likes him at linebacker at 6'2", 200, kind of a new age linebacker that can run, cover, and hit. Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee, big boys, true SEC battle, but Miami's getting him on campus again after getting him in campus for an unofficial visit in spring. Teammates with Zion Grady, who Miami is trending for. This is one to watch. This is a guy with a ton of talent. This would be a big-time statement to beat out these SEC schools. For this guy who, look, last year you went into Alabama and got a guy that wasn't as highly recruited, a lower 4-star player, but someone with a very similar athletic profile, Bobby Pruitt from Mobile, Alabama, also played all over the defense and offense. Skill guy, receiver, played safety, played linebacker, and he's been really, really good for Miami early on. Same size. Looks like he's going to develop into that San Francisco 49er style 3-down linebacker. They would love to go 2 for 2 in Alabama back-to-back years and get a guy like an Eric Winters.
Yeah, and he's listed as a safety, as a defensive back everywhere online. So you understand that he's a guy who has played a ton of defensive back, but you see the physicality. You see the ability for him to get downhill as a blitzer. You see him here, taking snaps and going all the way with it. So the frame is there, should be able to put some really good weight on and be an impact player pretty early.
Yeah. And now switching gears to a totally different player. This is a pure linebacker we're going to talk about now. Teammate of Floyd Boucard, who we just mentioned at D-tackle. And that's Ezekiel Marcelin, linebacker out of Miami Central. Look, Miami Central wins the championship every year. It used to not be like this, where one program just dominated public school like these guys do. But they've turned into that dynasty and continues to pump up players that Miami would like to get. Obviously, Ruben Bain, ACC Freshman of the Year, one of the best players in the country. Wesley Basaint, one of their starting linebackers, now from Central, who looks like he's going to be a star player potentially this year, breakout candidate, big time after a great spring. So with Marcelin, listed at 6 foot 190, I think the 190 is probably on the smaller side. I think he's outgrown that, but he is, he's not a huge guy. But he's been starting since day one at Central. He has that just natural knack as a linebacker, 3-star player, 441 in the country. Official visits to Louisville and Penn State. So some schools that produce pros and know what good defense looks like. Penn State was one of the best defenses of the country last year. Obviously, the linebackers and the edges they've been putting out. They have him lined up for a visit, but Miami's in a good position here. Again, pure linebacker, played early, instincts, run defense, tackling. I saw with the camp circuit, pass coverage. He can do it, but it's not like a Winters where he's going to be that kind of guy. But I think pure linebacker, great program, get him into your system and win some games. That's what Marcelin brings to the table. Yeah,
leader in that program, in that locker room over there, and he has a nose for the football.
So I'm switching gears now to a position that I think is going to define this recruiting class. That is the cornerback position. Look, Miami needs to start landing big-time corners. DJ Pickett out of Zephyr Hills, Florida. Talk about Ben Hanks out of Booker T. Big-time guys that we're not getting into now because they're not visiting this weekend. But this class overall, I think, is going to be very important. And some of these guys are maybe lower rank guys that could really turn into big-time players. And then there is a big-time player committed to another school on campus this weekend. So jumping right into it, Aiden Anding, 5'11", 165 from Ruston, Louisiana. Miami has a lot of ties into Louisiana. You're talking about Dennis Smith, recruiting director, Travis Jackson, the cornerback coach, Lance Guidry, defensive coordinator, a lot of ties there. You got guys like Jadis Richard, AJ Allen from Louisiana. You would love to add more to that group. So let's start with Anding, 3-star player, 675th in the country, but that undersells him. I think he's a riser. When you go back and look at some of the guys that make the NFL, which I always do, I see who are the first, second, third round picks at corner, at every position really, but at corner specifically, what do they look like in high school? And a lot of them, including the 3-star guys that blow up to first rounders, like Quinyon Mitchell, who was drafted by the Eagles in the first round this year out of North Florida. He played basketball. He competed in track and field. Got to corner a little later, but flourished. This guy fits the same bill. Real good basketball player, 14.8 points, 37% from three. He was first team all region or all district in basketball. State qualifier in the long jump, 22 and 2.5. So he's got some explosiveness to him. This is somebody who can run as well, ran the 200, ran the 400, but the explosiveness you see from the jumps. And he was really, really good last year as a young football player. Really is more of a basketball player. So he's new to the sport, but you watch him in the highlights, man. He knows what he's doing. He's got interest from TCU, Texas, and Arkansas. Had a crystal ball to Texas. I heard Arkansas is a major player. A lot of different sources on this recruitment, but he's on campus and Miami loves the player.
I'll take all the skill position guys from Louisiana we can get.
Yeah, that is a pipeline. And again, that profile, basketball, long jump for explosiveness, the playmaking he showed at an early age, all these things bode well. We need more athleticism, in my opinion, at the cornerback position. Too many guys that are just corners and they don't do anything else. They don't really run track at a high level. They don't play basketball. They don't play offense. We need more athletes at the corner position, more Phillip Buchanans, more intro roles. I think that is needed at that position from my perspective. Switching gears, Andrew Purcell, different player, similar story from Enterprise, Alabama. He's a third guy in that trio, 3-star guy, but again, an underrated player. Big schools after him. Georgia and Clemson recently offered. Kentucky's his only visit that I'm aware of this lined up. Guy plays multiple sports, runs track, makes plays all over the place on the football field. Not the tallest guy, but in terms of pure film, I'm hard-pressed to find a corner with more entertaining film and more eye-popping film, quite frankly, than Andrew Purcell. What do you see, Pete, when you watch him?
I mean, listen, first play of the game is a pick six, so that proves your point there. But versatility, the ability. I mean, he's tracking back deep and playing zone there. But I mean, once he gets the ball in his hands, he's trying to score with it. So I think you've mentioned it before. They want this trio, but even if he was a guy by himself there, he'd definitely be a take for this team.
So let's switch gears here to a player that is a big-time guy by everybody's standard. Jabari Antoine, LSU commit from New Iberia, Louisiana, Westgate High School. A lot of LSU ties there. Obviously, he's committed to the school. He is a big-time recruit, 4-star, 61st player in the country, 6'1", 170, plays quarterback in the past, played corner. There's a guy who has that versatility, that athleticism. He really is, to me, he kind of reminds me almost like a Brandon McGee type profile. He's a better recruit, but Brandon McGee is a pretty big recruit in his era of just a long, super athletic guy that you're projecting to corner. LSU's really has a history of producing these guys, first, second round picks. You'd love to swipe one of them now that you have Brian Kelly, who, he's not recruiting at the exact level of some of his predecessors, although he's a phenomenal coach. This is an LSU commit. It's going to be hard, but Miami thinks if they can get a good visit from him, maybe as a team picks some momentum up on the field, maybe LSU has a tough year, you have a chance to flip him down the road.
Yeah, and it's Jabari, not Jabari. But, I mean, look, this guy, you see, he's a baby face still, right? So probably still growing. It's going to be very easy for him to fill that frame out. The LSU thing is going to be, it's a tough one there. Is it like was it Ellis Robinson last year? He committed to Georgia. That was a tough flip. Is that going to be a similar situation here? Let's see. But obviously have the opportunity to come in, any of these guys at the cornerback position, and see some early playing time. So that's a huge sell.
So look, big weekend. Let's pray for good weather. It's probably going to be hot for these guys. Let's hope they have some good time, get to the beach, and Miami's able to do what they do. They've been a very good recruiting school since Cristobal got here, man. So I expect that to continue. A lot of big names here, and these are some names that we may be talking about on future shows for years as Miami Hurricanes. And we'll let you know what happened on this weekend. Check in on Monday. We're going daily, and we will not stop giving you the absolute latest on the Miami Hurricanes. So like, subscribe to this podcast, any podcast platform, whether it's YouTube or audio, we're everywhere. And CanesInsight.com forums. Give me the absolute latest on the Canes to the minute. I mean, you're talking about these guys post an Instagram pic at Joe Stonecrab or at Smith Walensky. You will see it immediately on CanesInsight.com, the forum. So if you're an addict and you need the fix constantly, that's the place for you, and it's all free. So have a good weekend. Go Canes.
Go Canes.